Can you imagine if you weren't actually Leo's dad?
I'm not crazy. I know I'm not.
People say Seattle has two seasons, the rainy season and August. I had a third, the season I got played. It all started with a single sentence my girlfriend Isla said at a family dinner. A joke that, according to my lawyer's final bill, was worth about $250 a word. This isn't just another story about getting cheated on. This is a 60-minute deep dive into how the smallest, most innocent-looking red flags, like a partner who's suddenly secretive with their phone or a little too quick to get defensive, can be the tip of a massive, life-altering iceberg. Over the next hour, we're going to break down the masterclass in psychological manipulation I didn't even know I was enrolled in. You'll see the Mission Impossible style operation I had to pull off just to get a DNA sample, and you'll be right there with me in that car, looking out at Elliott Bay, at the gut-wrenching moment I saw a 0% on my phone screen. We'll navigate the absolute nightmare of the legal system, where I learned a terrifying lesson. Biology doesn't always matter to a judge. And along the way, we'll uncover a plot twist involving the last person on Earth I ever expected to help me. This is the story of how I lost a family I thought was mine and in the process found myself. But before the lawyers, before the DNA test, and before the drama, there was just us, Mike and Isla. We met at the Capitol Hill block party, the kind of meet cute you'd see in a movie set in Seattle. She was funny, smart, worked at some sustainable startup, and had a smile that could make you forget about the 9 months of gray skies. We moved at startup speed, dating, moving in together, the whole deal. Because when you're in love and the rent is $3,000 a month, it just makes sense, becomes your mantra. And then came the 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. After the initial holy crap moment, I was all in. I was reading the dad blogs, I was practicing my dad jokes, I was ready. I was building a future on a foundation I didn't know was already cracked. So let's start there. With the very first red flag I chose to ignore. This is my story, but I know I'm not alone. We all have a chapter in our lives that needs to be told. If you have a story you feel is ready to be shared, you'll find a pinned, anonymous submission link in the comments below. Let's create a space where our experiences can help others feel seen. And to make sure our community has a real-world impact, for every 1,000 views on our stories, $1 will be donated to a fund that directly supports those facing emotional and financial hardship. Your story has power. Let's use it for good. Before all that, I was just Mike, your standard issue Seattle guy. My personality was basically a mix of strong coffee, a love for aggressively hopped IPAs, and the eternal, slightly painful optimism that this would be the year the Seahawks finally figure it out. Life was good, it was simple, predictable, even, and then came Isla. We met at the Capitol Hill block party. You know the scene, too loud, too crowded, but there's that one person you see across the sea of flannel and suddenly none of it matters. She was smart, funny, worked for some sustainable startup, the whole package. Our relationship moved at what I call startup speed. It went from nice to meet you to let's get a U-Haul in about 4 months. We told ourselves it was love, and it felt like it, but the real driver, the rent in Seattle is insane, and it just makes sense financially. And when you move that fast, you're bound to hit a speed bump. Ours came in the form of 2 little pink lines on a plastic stick. The initial shock, oh, it was a full-body experience. A genuine heart-pounding, am I even qualified to own a plant, kind of panic. But once the dust settled, something surprising happened. I got excited, genuinely excited. I fell down the rabbit hole. I was watching those TikToks of dads with their newborns trying to figure out the difference between a stroller and a travel system. I started practicing my dad jokes in the mirror. I even learned how to pronounce quinoa correctly because I figured that's what responsible Seattle parents feed their kids. I was all in. I was ready to build a life. I just didn't realize I was building it on a foundation that was already crumbling. And looking back now, with the benefit of hindsight and a mountain of legal fees, I see the first major lesson. The very first red flag wasn't something she did, it was something we did. We built a family on a foundation of convenience. It's a trap so many of us fall into, especially in expensive cities. You rush things because it's practical. You combine finances, sign a lease, and build a life together before you've truly stress-tested the relationship. You mistake momentum for stability. And that mistake, that tiny crack in the foundation, is what allows all the other, more obvious red flags to creep in without you even noticing. And oh boy, were there other red flags, the kind that seem small at first but are actually waving frantically, trying to get your attention. Before we get into it, you have to understand a little bit about human psychology. Your brain, when you're in love, goes into full-on defense attorney mode for the person you care about. It will find any excuse, bend any logic, and ignore evidence that is as clear as Mount Rainier on a sunny day, just to maintain the happy reality you've built. My brain was working overtime, trying to convince a jury of one, me, that everything was fine. The first piece of evidence the prosecution presented was the great phone snatch of 2023. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear. My phone was dead, and I just wanted to check the time on hers while she was in the other room. The moment my fingers touched it, she flew out of the kitchen like a hawk spotting a field mouse. She snatched that phone out of my hand faster than a Ceadolite claims a parking spot at Pike Place Market on a Saturday. Her excuse? Sensitive work stuff, my friends. She did marketing for an organic meal box delivery app. What kind of state secrets was she protecting? The exact location of a kale farm, the proprietary recipe for a quinoa bowl. It was absurd, but I let it go. Then came the second red flag, a character named Caleb. For about 2 weeks, he was a recurring character in her work stories. Caleb said this, Caleb thinks that. Just some new tech bro at her company. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, radio silence. The name Caleb was scrubbed from our conversations. So one night I asked casually, hey, whatever happened to that Caleb guy you used to talk about? Her reaction was a 10 out of 10 on the defensiveness scale. Why are you so obsessed with my coworkers? That's weird, Mike. And just like that, I was the weird one. My simple question was turned into an obsession. I never brought him up again. And finally, there was the Seattle freeze I was getting from her mom. You know the phenomenon, that polite, surface-level friendliness that never quite thaws. Every time we visited, her mom would give me this smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of someone who knows a secret and is deeply uncomfortable about it. Her silence was louder than any accusation. So what did I do with all this grade A, premium quality evidence? I buried it. I told myself I was being paranoid. I blamed the pregnancy hormones. I even blamed the weather. I actually thought, maybe she's just low on vitamin D. And here's a crucial life lesson for you all. A vitamin D deficiency can make you a little gloomy, maybe a bit tired. It does not, however, turn you into a KGB agent with your iPhone, but ignoring problems doesn't make them go away. It just lets them marinate, and all that simmering tension, all those unasked questions were about to boil over at the most awkward place imaginable. A passive-aggressive Sunday dinner at her parents' house. We're at her parents' house in Bellevue for the obligatory Sunday dinner. You know the kind of house, perfectly manicured lawn, everything beige, looks like it came straight out of a catalog. Her dad, Frank, is half watching one of those home renovation shows on HGTV, where a happy couple with an unrealistic budget argues over shiplap. The vibe is comfortably numb. I'm on the couch scrolling through my fantasy football lineup, trying to decide if my quarterback is going to have a good week. Isla is next to me, holding our son, Leo. He's just a few months old, making those little gurgling noises that melt your heart. Everything is normal. Boringly, wonderfully normal. On the TV, the couple is having a dramatic, made-for-television argument about kitchen countertops. Isla lets out this laugh, but it's not a normal laugh. It's a little too loud, a little too high-pitched. It sounds forced. She pulls Leo closer, looks at me, and then she says it. The sentence that changed everything. Haha, can you imagine? She says, still giggling, how funny would it be if you found out you weren't actually Leo's dad? And just like that, the world stopped. The comfortable numbness of the room instantly evaporated. The air got thick. It was the kind of silence that's so total, so absolute you can physically feel it. You could hear the rain tapping on the windowpane. You could probably hear a pin drop in the next town over. Frank, her dad, fumbled with the remote and it clattered onto the hardwood floor. From the kitchen, we heard the sharp crack of a plate shattering. I swear, even the Alexa in the corner went silent, as if it was processing a critical system failure. I just stared at her. My brain was doing mental gymnastics trying to process what I just heard. It was like my internal computer just showed the blue screen of death. Isla's face went from amused to pale in about half a second. She saw the looks on everyone's faces. She saw the mushroom cloud she had just created in the middle of her parents' living room. She immediately went into damage control mode. I'm kidding. Oh my God, I'm totally kidding. She stammered, her fake laugh now sounding like a nervous tick. Look at his chin. He has your chin dimple. It's all you. And here's the thing, I don't have a chin dimple. Nobody in my family has a chin dimple. We're of Irish descent. Our chins are built for enduring harsh winds and telling long stories, not for being cute. But you know who did have a very prominent, very noticeable chin dimple in his LinkedIn profile picture? Caleb, the tech bro. The guy I wasn't supposed to be obsessed with. At that moment, I didn't say a word, I just nodded, but in my head, a switch flipped. It wasn't just a weird joke anymore. It was a clue. It was a thread, and I knew with every fiber of my being that if I pulled on it, something was going to unravel. That night wasn't just the end of a dinner. It was the end of my denial. And it was the beginning of my descent into a masterclass on a very specific, very toxic subject I now know all too well: psychological gaslighting. That car ride home from her parents' house was silent, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the loud, ringing silence of 1,000 unasked questions, and when we finally got home, the real masterclass began. I didn't know it then, but I had just enrolled in an unscheduled mandatory course, Gaslighting 101, and my girlfriend Isla was the professor. For those who aren't familiar, gaslighting isn't just lying. It's a form of psychological manipulation so insidious that it makes you question your own sanity, your own perception of reality. It's a playbook, and over the next few days, Isla ran every single play on me. It started with phase 1, simple denial. I tried to bring it up calmly. Hey, about that joke earlier. It felt a little weird. Her response, a masterwork of dismissal. Oh my God, Mike, it was a joke. Can't you take a joke? Why are you being so sensitive all of a sudden? See what she did there? In one move, the problem wasn't her bizarre comment. The problem was my reaction to it. I was the one being too sensitive. When I didn't back down, we moved to phase 2, the counterattack. This is when the manipulator deflects by going on the offensive. You know what this is about? She said, her voice rising. This is because you didn't get that promotion last week. You're just looking for something to be angry about and you're taking it out on me. It was brilliant in a terrifying way. She was trying to reframe my legitimate concern as a symptom of my own professional disappointment. I was no longer a partner with a valid question. I was a bitter man lashing out. But the final and most powerful play in the book is phase 3, reversing victim and offender. This is the nuclear option. This is when the person who hurt you somehow makes you the bad guy. During one argument, through tears, she delivered the knockout blow. I carried our son for 9 months. I gave up my body for this family. And this is how you treat me? You question me, you're the one being selfish. You're the one tearing this family apart. And for a while, it worked. I started to wonder, am I being paranoid? Am I the one who's losing it? It's like being in a funhouse hall of mirrors. You don't know which reflection is real anymore. Now, here's where a small, desperate act of self-preservation changed everything. I felt like I was going crazy, so I started recording our arguments on my phone. Nothing dramatic, I just start a voice memo and put the phone in my pocket. Thankfully, Washington is a one-party consent state, which means as long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, in this case, me, it's legal. I just needed a record, something to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining things. Weeks later, after everything had fallen apart, I went back and listened to those recordings, and what I heard chilled me to the bone. It wasn't the sound of two people having a messy, emotional fight. It was the sound of one person methodically executing a script. Her accusations, her tears, her deflections, they were all tools. The goal wasn't to resolve a conflict. The goal was to win, to make me doubt myself so much that I just give up and drop it. And that's the most important lesson from this chapter. Gaslighting works because it isolates you inside your own head. It makes you feel like you're the only one who sees the problem. That's why having some form of objective proof, whether it's a recording, a text message, or just writing things down, can be a lifeline. It's your anchor to reality. And my anchor was telling me that I wasn't crazy. I was being played. And if she was willing to go to these lengths to avoid a simple question, then the answer had to be something she was terrified of me finding out. I knew then that I couldn't just drop it. I had to go further. I had to run my own covert operation. So there I was. I knew I wasn't crazy, and I knew something was deeply wrong. But knowing isn't enough. You need proof. And in this situation, there's only one kind of proof that cuts through all the noise, all the gaslighting, and all the lies. A DNA test. I felt like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, except my mission involved less hanging from helicopters and more anxiously watching my Amazon delivery tracker. I ordered one of those at-home paternity test kits online. The whole process felt clandestine. I timed the delivery for when I knew Isla would be out. The box arrived, plain and brown, sandwiched between a bag of my favorite coffee beans and a new raincoat. The perfect urban camouflage. I stashed it in the back of my closet like it was a state secret. Now came the hardest part, the actual sample collection. The instructions say to just swab the inside of the cheek. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. Swabbing the cheek of a sleeping baby without waking them up is like trying to defuse a bomb that cries and needs a diaper change. I tried once while Leo was napping and he immediately started stirring. I backed away like I just stepped on a landmine. I couldn't risk him waking up and Isla walking in to find me holding a giant Q-tip like some kind of weird tooth fairy. I needed a new plan. A plan that was silent, efficient, and, well, a little gross. I'm not proud of this next part, but psychological warfare calls for unconventional tactics. I waited for a used diaper, a number 2 to be specific. Look, don't judge me, I was desperate. I read online that it was a viable, if unpleasant, way to get a sample. So, in the dead of night, armed with rubber gloves and a heavy heart, I performed what I now call Operation Diaper DNA. It was a low point, but I got the sample, sealed it, and dropped the package in a public mailbox the next morning on my way to work. Mission accomplished. I thought I was in the clear. I spent the next few days trying to act normal, which is incredibly hard to do when you feel like a character in a spy movie and your entire future is sitting in a lab somewhere in another state. But I made a rookie mistake. A digital breadcrumb. I had deleted the order confirmation from my main inbox, but I forgot to clear out my archived mail folder. One evening, I came home and the air in the apartment was different. It was cold. Colder than the usual Seattle freeze. Isla was sitting on the couch, staring at her laptop. My laptop, actually. She had gone through it. And on the screen was the email confirmation from the DNA lab. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked up at me, her eyes filled with a terrifying combination of betrayal and pure, unadulterated fear. "What did you do, Mike?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. There was no more denying, no more gaslighting. The game was up. I had been caught, but in a strange way, she had been caught too. Her panic told me everything I needed to know before the results even came back. The bomb had been planted. The timer was ticking. And we both knew that in a few days, our lives were going to detonate. All that was left to do was wait for the email that would either confirm my worst fears or make me the biggest monster on the planet. The wait for that email was its own special kind of torture. It was 3 days of walking on eggshells, of forced, hollow conversations. We were two actors in a terrible play, both knowing the final act was about to begin. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my car, parked at one of those scenic overlooks with a perfect view of Elliott Bay. The ferries were gliding across the water, the city skyline looked beautiful, everything was peaceful. And then my phone buzzed. The subject line was simple: "Your paternity test results are ready." My heart started hammering against my ribs. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone. I clicked the link, logged in, and there it was, at the top of the page in big, bold, undeniable letters. Probability of paternity, 0%. 0, not 0.1%, not unlikely. 0. A perfect, round, soul-crushing 0. The world didn't just stop this time, it tilted on its axis. The peaceful view of the bay suddenly looked sickening. I fumbled with the car door, stumbled out onto the gravel, and I threw up. It wasn't a noble, cinematic vomit. It was a violent, full-body rejection, not of the bad coffee I'd had that morning, but of the entire reality I had been living. My whole world had just been revealed as a lie, and my body was physically expelling it. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I drove home. I walked into the apartment with a strange, chilling calm. The anger, the sadness, it was all there, but it was buried under a thick layer of shock. Isla was waiting, her face a mask of anxiety. She knew the email was coming. I didn't say a word. I just walked over to her, held out my phone, and showed her the screen. Her face crumpled. It was the look of someone whose carefully constructed world had just been demolished by a two-word wrecking ball. The tears came instantly, and she collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. And between the heaving sobs and desperate gasps for air, the truth finally came out. The confession I had been dreading yet needing to hear. It was just one time, she choked out. After a company happy hour with Caleb. We were all so drunk. I swear I took the morning after pill. I did, it didn't work. She kept going, the excuses tumbling out. By the time I knew I was pregnant, we were so happy. I convinced myself it had to be yours. The timing was so close. I knew you'd be a wonderful father, and Caleb, he's not. I did it for us, Mike. I did it for our future. I did it for us. Listen closely to those words, because that sentence is the pinnacle of selfish manipulation disguised as a noble sacrifice. She didn't do it for us, she did it for her. She had a problem, a consequence of her own actions, and she needed a solution. She needed someone stable, someone reliable, someone who was all in on the idea of being a dad to clean up her mess. And I was the perfect candidate. I wasn't her partner in that moment, I was her scapegoat. In that instant, every happy memory, every late-night conversation, every shared dream for our future became tainted. It was all built on a lie she looked me in the eye and told every single day for almost a year. And the moment you realize that, the moment you understand the depth of the deception, everything changes. The question is no longer, how do we fix this? The question becomes, what the hell do I do now? Because I wasn't just a guy who had been cheated on. I was a man who had been tricked into loving a child that wasn't mine under the roof of a house I paid for. And I was about to find out that getting out of that situation was a legal and emotional minefield. After the confession, Isla packed her things and went to her parents' house. I thought that was the end of the hard part. I thought, okay, the truth is out, now we can just undo it. I was so naive. I was about to learn that in the eyes of the law, the truth is often just a suggestion, and I had just bought a one-way ticket to a place I like to call legal purgatory. My first call was to a lawyer. I walked into his office feeling like the victim, armed with a DNA test that screamed 0%. I expected him to say, "Case closed, son, let's get this sorted." Instead, he leaned back in his expensive chair, looked at me over his glasses, and introduced me to a few terrifying legal concepts. First, he explained paternity fraud. That's the official term for what happened to me. But here's the kicker, he told me that in Washington state, when an unmarried man signs the birth certificate, which I had done with tears of joy in my eyes, it creates a presumption of paternity. That means the law presumes I'm the dad, and that presumption is surprisingly hard to break. The DNA test was evidence, yes, but it wasn't an automatic get-out-of-jail-free card. Then he dropped the real bombshell on me, a legal doctrine called father by estoppel. It's a fancy way of saying that if you've acted like a dad, the court can decide you are the dad, biology be damned. My lawyer put it bluntly. The court's primary concern isn't you, Mike, it's the best interests of the child. A judge could look at this and say, you've been this child's father for months, to remove you now would be harmful to him. And then, congratulations, you could be on the hook for child support for the next 18 years, for another man's kid. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had been lied to, manipulated, and now the legal system was telling me that my reward for being a loving, committed father might be a 2-decade-long financial punishment. Our first legal step was to file a petition to disestablish my paternity. But to do that, we had to establish someone else's, Caleb's, and getting Caleb to cooperate was a whole other adventure. When contacted, he claimed he wasn't sure if he was the father. He dodged our calls, ignored our letters. The guy was a ghost. So my lawyer had to hire a process server, basically a professional tag player, to hunt him down and serve him with a court order for a DNA test. The server finally cornered him at some trendy coffee shop in South Lake Union while he was probably in the middle of a very important meeting about synergy. I have this beautiful image in my head of Caleb, mid-sip of his $7 oat milk latte, getting served legal papers. Small victories, and all of this, of course, costs money, a lot of money. I'm going to put a couple of my lawyer's invoices up on the screen here with the personal details blurred out, of course. Look at those numbers. Every email, every phone call, every court filing, it's a line item. This is the hidden price tag of deception. It's not just an emotional cost, it's a staggering financial one. Here's the lesson from this chapter. The moment you suspect something like this, your first call should not be to your best friend or your mom. It should be to a lawyer. The legal clock starts ticking immediately, and the system is not designed to be intuitive or fair to guys in our situation. The battle was just beginning. I was fighting for my future, my financial freedom, and my sanity. But to truly understand the absurdity of my situation, you have to understand the man at the center of it all. The man whose responsibility I was now legally trying to avoid. So let's take a little detour and answer the question, who the hell is Caleb? When you have a broken heart and way too much time on your hands, you develop a new skill. You become a digital Sherlock Holmes. While the lawyers were doing their thing, I was doing my own research. I needed to understand who this guy was. Who was Caleb? What kind of person was at the center of this entire mess? So I did what anyone in my situation would do. I dove headfirst into the rabbit hole of his social media, and what I found was exactly what you'd expect, but somehow even more ridiculous. Caleb's Instagram profile was a monument to the modern tech bro stereotype. It was a carefully curated collection of cliches. There were the hiking photos, of course. Him standing on a mountaintop wearing brand new, perfectly clean hiking gear, staring pensively into the distance as if contemplating the future of blockchain. There were the conference photos, him on a stage with a headset microphone, pointing at a slide filled with buzzwords like synergy, disruption, and paradigm shift. And my personal favorite, the photos of him posing with dogs that were clearly not his, with captions like making new friends. It was like watching a character who'd been rejected from the cast of HBO's Silicon Valley for being too much of a caricature. He was the human equivalent of a LinkedIn motivational post, all surface, no substance. I scrolled through months of this stuff, feeling a mix of disgust and fascination. But then, as I dug deeper, I found something that wasn't just cliché, it was genuinely shocking. Buried in the tagged photos, I found her. A woman who appeared again and again in group shots at holiday parties on vacations. A quick search confirmed it. Caleb had a long-term girlfriend, and he had been with her the entire time he was involved with Isla. The whole story suddenly clicked into place. The one-time mistake at a happy hour wasn't a random slip-up. It was a pattern. This wasn't a man who made a drunken error. This was a man who lived a life of casual deception. He wasn't just a stereotype, he was a serial cheater, and that brought me to the most painful realization of all. This was the man Isla chose to cheat on me with. not some romantic artist or a noble doctor. A guy who sells vague promises about technology and lies to everyone in his life. This discovery did something strange to me. It didn't just hurt my heart, it offended my intelligence. It made me question Isla's judgment, her character, everything. The betrayal wasn't just that she had slept with someone else. It was who she had slept with. She hadn't just broken our trust, she had traded our genuine connection for something hollow, something fake, something built on the same kind of empty buzzwords he peddled at his tech conferences. And here's a lesson that took me a long time to learn. When someone betrays you, it's almost never about you. It's not because you weren't good enough or smart enough or handsome enough. It's about them. It's about a void they have inside them, a lack of integrity or a deep-seated insecurity that they try to fill with fleeting, meaningless validation. Understanding that didn't take away the pain, but it did shift my perspective. This wasn't my failure. This was a story about two deeply flawed people who made a mess and tried to make me the janitor. And just when I thought I was completely alone in this mess, that the whole world was against me, I got a phone call from the most unexpected person imaginable. A call that would change the entire dynamic of my fight. After figuring out the truth about Caleb, the anger started to subside, and what was left was just emptiness. My apartment, which used to feel full of life and future plans, now just felt like a big, quiet box. The Seattle rain seemed to be in a permanent state of drizzle, matching my mood perfectly. The baby swing sat motionless in the corner. The changing table was covered in a thin layer of dust. It was a museum of a life that never really existed. I knew I couldn't live like that. I couldn't heal in a space that was haunted by ghosts of what could have been. So one Saturday, I decided it was time for a purge. I spent the entire day packing up everything that was meant for Leo. The tiny onesies, the soft blankets, the toys he never got to play with. The hardest part was the crib. I remember spending a torturous 6 hours assembling that thing, deciphering the IKEA-style instructions, convinced I was the least handy man on the planet. But taking it apart, it took me 20 minutes. Turns out, a healthy dose of righteous anger is the best screwdriver you can own. I packed my car to the brim and drove everything to a local charity called Mary's Place, an organization that helps families experiencing homelessness. As I watched them unload the boxes, I felt a strange mix of profound sadness and a flicker of relief. I was letting go. I was closing a chapter. I came back to my now empty apartment, feeling raw and exhausted. And then my phone rang. The caller ID said Frank, Isla's dad. My stomach tightened. I braced myself for a lecture, for a guilt trip, for a plea to think about the baby and forgive his daughter. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Mike, he said, his voice sounding tired. It's Frank. I waited for the sermon to begin, but it never came. Instead, what he said next completely floored me. Listen, he said, and there was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. I'm not calling to defend her. What she did, there's no excuse for it. Her mother and I are ashamed. We're calling to apologize to you. I was speechless. He continued, we've seen issues with her and the truth for a long time. Little things you brush off as a parent, but we never thought it would go this far. We should have stepped in. We should have done more. We failed as parents. And then came the final shock. I know you're in a legal battle and I know it's expensive, he said. We want to help. We'll pay for half of your lawyer's fees. In that moment, a huge weight I didn't even know I was carrying just lifted. It was the validation I had been subconsciously craving. It wasn't just me. I wasn't the crazy one. Her own family saw it too. That phone call taught me one of the most profound lessons of this entire ordeal. It's easy to paint people as one-dimensional villains, but reality is always more complicated. Sometimes the story isn't about one bad person. It's about a chain of bad choices, of enabling, of turning a blind eye. And sometimes the family of the person who hurt you is a victim too, trapped by their own love and loyalty. I hung up the phone with tears in my eyes, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of anger or sadness. They were tears of relief. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. And with that unexpected alliance, I finally felt like I had the strength to see this through to the end, to not just survive it, but to actually start rebuilding. With the DNA proof and Frank's support, my name was removed from the birth certificate. The court officially declared that I was not Leo's father. It was over, but the end of a legal fight is not the end of the story. The emotional aftermath is a whole different war, and to win that one, you have to write your own rules for survival. I call mine the rebuild protocol. It's not complicated. It's just 3 simple rules that I wish someone had told me at the beginning of all this. Rule number 1, your gut is your best compass. That little voice in the back of your head, that nagging feeling that something is off. It's not paranoia. It's your intuition, and it's almost always right. Don't let your optimism or your desire for things to be okay talk you out of listening to it. Trust that feeling. It's trying to protect you. Rule number 2, document everything. We live in a digital world. Your feelings can be manipulated, your memories can fade, but a timestamp on a text message is forever. Save the emails. Screenshot the weird comments. Keep the receipts. I'm not saying you should live your life expecting the worst, but having an objective record of reality is your best defense against gaslighting. It's your anchor when someone is trying to create a storm in your head. And rule number 3. Lawyer first, friends later. When you're in a crisis, your first instinct is to call someone you love for support. That's important. But in situations like this, your first call has to be to a legal professional. The system has rules and deadlines you don't know about, and acting on emotional advice before getting legal counsel can cost you dearly. Get your strategy right, then call your friends to cry about it. So where am I now? Well, I moved. I'm in a new neighborhood, Fremont, just a few miles away, but it feels like a different world. I adopted a rescue dog, a goofy golden retriever mix named Brewer, who is now the main character in my life. I'm in therapy, which is something I recommend to literally every human being on the planet. It's like having a coach for your brain. As for Isla and Caleb, from what I've heard, she's now in her own legal battle, trying to get him to pay child support. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Looking back, I've learned that people will tell you living well is the best revenge. I don't think that's true. Revenge is a pointless game. The goal isn't to live well to spite someone else. The goal is to live authentically for yourself. This experience could have destroyed me. It could have made me bitter, angry, and closed off forever. And some days it almost did. But I realized that the ultimate act of defiance against betrayal is not to build walls, but to rebuild yourself stronger, wiser, and with more compassion than you had before. This is not a story about how I got played. This is a story about how I refused to stay down. It's about how I took the worst chapter of my life and refused to let it be the last one. Betrayal doesn't get to define your story. Only you do. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If you've been through something that tested you, something that broke you and forced you to rebuild, I want to hear your story. You'll find a pinned, anonymous submission link in the comments below. Let's turn this space into a library of resilience, a beacon for anyone navigating their own storm. And remember, for every 1,000 views, $1 goes to a fund helping those in need, so your time here truly makes a difference. This is just one story. There are so many more to tell. Make sure you're subscribed because what's coming next you won't want to miss.